This is Wall Street Week. Welcome back. Okay, let's start with what's really important tonight. It's just your money, not your life. Everybody who really loved you a week ago still loves you tonight. And that's a heck of a lot more important than the numbers on a brokerage statement. The robins will sing, the crocuses will bloom, babies will gurgle, and puppies will curl up in your lap and drift happily to sleep, even when the stock market goes temporarily insane. And now that that's all fully in perspective, let me say, ouch, and eek, and medic. John Templeton, the newspaper Variety, recalled its famous 1929 headline this week. They said, "Wall Street lays an egg, the sequel." You were around in 1929, although you weren't as active as you are today. What's the comparison?
The panic this time was much greater, much larger. But at that time, the stock market would have recovered within a year, except that the panic spread into general business conditions. And that I do not expect this time. Things are so different. At that time, there was no unemployment insurance. There was no guarantee of bank deposits. There was no insurance on brokers' accounts. There was no Social Security, and many other factors. So that this time, I think this is simply a stock market, a bear market in the stock market, and will be reflected in little, if any, decline in general business.
President Reagan last night seemed to be at pains not to say we would not have a recession. He said if we lost confidence, if Wall Street's mood spread to the country, that we could have a recession earlier than we might. Does that worry you?
No, that is about the same thing as was said in 1929. But it's also said with every other bear market which has not increased in spread. It was said in the bear market of 1937 and 1942 and 1974. And usually it's true that nothing will happen this time except a temporary decline. I would go as far, Lewis, to say that I would be very surprised if there is any decrease at all in the amount of dividends paid out. I'd be very surprised if there was any decrease in the book values of corporations. I'd also be surprised if there was even a decrease in the sales volume of corporations.
What's your advice to people in terms of the stock market now?
Patience, be a long-term investor, be prepared financially and psychologically to live through a series of bull markets and bear markets, because in the long run, common stocks will pay off enormously. The next bull market will carry prices far higher than this one.
Why?
Because the whole nation is growing more rapidly. Gross national product of the nation will double in at least the next 10 years. We think the gross national product of the nation 40 years from now will be 64 times as high as it is now. And that will be reflected in sales volume and profits and share prices. So that from a long-term investment standpoint, it's a question of when should you put your money into stocks. We can't give you the exact day, but sometime the bull market will start again and you want to be in on it.
Barely 2 months ago, you were here with me, and you were totally optimistic about the future. Have you changed that attitude a little?
No, Lewis, the outlook is so wonderful that none of us really understand. All the world is progressing more and more rapidly. Half of all that's been discovered in science in the last 50 years, half of all discovered in medicines in the last 20 years. There are 10 times as many shareholders now as there were 40 years ago. Pension funds, individual retirement accounts, and all growing so rapidly, and the quantity of shares available to buy is shrinking, so that in the long run, share prices are likely to be much higher than they've ever seen before.
You and I may believe that, but what do you tell the individual who sees a market crashing the way this one's crashed, thinks he's at the mercy of computers and big money managers? How can he have any assurance that this is a reasonable way to prepare for one's future?
By looking at history, there's never been a time when you could have invested, never in the last 40 years, been a time when you could have invested on common stocks that you wouldn't have made money over a 5-year period. Or to say it differently, the great bull market did end 2 months ago on August 25th. We are already now well into a bear market, but it's possible the bear market has already ended. But if it hasn't ended yet, the chances are it will end by the end of next year. So all of us should start focusing on when can we get in order to share in the next bull market.
Would you race to buy stocks Monday morning, or would you wait and let this market settle?
I would wait and let this market settle. We have not increased our total holdings of common stocks this week, and it may be several weeks before we do.